Hello students, greetings of the day. I, Mrs. Usha Vasani, welcome you all to RKC Online Social Studies class. How are you all doing? Hope you and your family members are doing good, and so am I. Today we are going to study the last part of chapter number 15, The Coming of the British. So let us start with today's learning. Students, I have divided this chapter in 8 parts for your better understanding. Today in this video, we are going to sum up the whole chapter which I had already divided in 7 parts. We are going to sum up the whole chapter and do the recapping of the whole chapter so that you can at a stretch get connected to all 7 parts and understand the whole chapter in short. So let us begin with the revision, with the recapping of this topic. Students, let us first understand different periods of history. Actually, Indian history is divided into 3 parts according to the timeline, and the 3 parts are ancient period, medieval period and modern period. So first let us understand which period was ancient, which was medieval, and then the modern period. We knew about, or we talked about, the different periods of Indian history. Now in this chapter we will talk about the modern history of modern India. India was a very rich country. It was well known all over the world for its rich silk, gold, indigo, precious stones, and most of all, the spices. Now, today in this learning, we will know from the beginning about the exploration of different Europeans and who came first, who explored India first. Let us know everything and sum up the whole chapter in one learning. Students, let us know something about Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese explorer. In 1498 CE, Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, discovered a new sea route to India via the Cape of Good Hope. He was the first European to reach India via Atlantic Ocean. When he arrives at Calicut on the Malabar coast, Vasco da Gama sailed from Lisbon, that is from Portugal, in July 1497 and rounded the Cape of Good Hope and anchored at Malindi on the east coast of Africa. So finally he arrived India on May 20th, 1498. He stayed in India for 3 months and returned with a rich cargo which he sold in European market at an exorbitant price of 60 times more the cost of his voyage. Students, imagine what a big profit he did. He was highly impressed and he came back to India after 3 months. The Portuguese were the first to come to Calicut, that is Kozhikode now, it is known as Kozhikode, and started trading with India. They built trade centers at Cochin, that is now known as Kochi, Kannur, which is now known as Kannur, and Calicut. Spices were the most important item of trade that the Portuguese dealt in because they helped in the preservation of meat in winter and made the food tastier. They also traded in silk and gold, which were considered very valuable in the whole of Europe. The Dutch followed the Portuguese into India and established trade centers. Then the British came and the Dutch gave up their centers as they were more interested in East Indies. Tales of India's prosperity reached England through the British travelers who came to India. The British merchant formed the East India Company in 1600 CE with the permission from Queen Elizabeth I, who was the Queen of England and Ireland at that time. The company got permission from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir to trade in India and set up the first trading center at Surat. But meanwhile, the French also set up their own trading company and established themselves in Chandernagar, which is in Bengal, and Pondicherry, which is near Chennai. A sense of rivalry developed between the British and the French as each of them tried to establish new and larger colonies in India. There was a clash between the two, which resulted in French being defeated by the British. And as a result, the French were allowed to keep only Pondicherry, which is Puducherry now. So they were allowed to keep only that area, and this is how the British started taking control over every part of India. Everything was very smoothly going on till Aurangzeb was on the throne. The empire of Mughals gradually weakened after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707 CE, and the British English East India Company became more ambitious. Now, when they thought that Aurangzeb is no more, they started having the wicked ideas in their mind, and their intentions started spoiling. Now they wanted to take control over various parts of India. They wanted to bring Bengal under their control because it was the richest province in the country. And that became the main reason behind the Battle of Plassey. Now, as English East India Company became more ambitious, means the English people, the British people wanted to spread their control over various parts of India, and they were very sure that the king after Aurangzeb is not that strong as how Aurangzeb was. So they started taking steps towards controlling or taking control over India. Now, children, as I told you that the English East India Company became more and more ambitious. They wanted to take control over various parts of India, but they first wanted to bring Bengal under their control as it was the richest province in the country. This was the reason behind Battle of Plassey, and then it took place in 1757. The British had started maintaining an army in Bengal. They had begun to fortify Calcutta. Sirajud-Dowla, the Nawab of Bengal, ordered the removal of the British army and all the fortifications. When the British refused, he declared war on them. However, the British under Robert Clive emerged victorious. Sirajud-Dowla was captured and put to death. This was the first step towards the conquest of Bengal. And children, you can see on your screen that huge army on both the sides came opposite to each other, and they had a battle which is remembered till date in the history as Battle of Plassey. Now students, I hope you remember the story what happened after Battle of Plassey, which we have already seen in the previous videos. But I'll tell you in short that after Battle of Plassey, Siraj-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal, was captured and put to death. He was backstabbed by his own army official Mir Jafar. British promised Mir Jafar that they would give him the throne of Bengal and bribed him. After the death of Siraj-ud-Dawla, it was Mir Jafar who was put on throne. But soon, even he refused to certain ambitious conditions of British, and he was again replaced by his own son-in-law Mir Qasim. Actually, British wanted the ruler who would be a puppet ruler, and the ruler did not have any right to take the decisions. So, getting annoyed with him, even Mir Qasim wanted to oppose the British. Now, due to that reason, another battle, the Battle of Buxar, took place in 1764, and it was fought between the Nawab of Bengal, that is Mir Qasim, Nawab of Awadh Shuja-ud-Dawla, and Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. So, the British was on the one side, and on the other side it was Nawab of Bengal, Nawab of Awadh, and Mughal Emperor, the three of them on one side. The British even emerged victorious again, and thus Bengal finally came under British rule. This was Battle of Buxar, which was very a huge battle among the three of the Indian rulers against British. Though British emerged victorious, but this was the Battle of Buxar, which took place in 1764 and which is remarkably remembered in the history. We discussed about the Battle of Buxar. Now, in today's learning, we will know further that what happened after the Battle of Buxar, after the introduction of two different policies by the British in India. So, after the battle ended, the joint armies, as we know about the Buxar, that the joint armies of Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II were defeated by the British. Then Mir Qasim absconded from the battle, means he ran away from the battle, and means during the war, as soon as he realized that Britishers are going to be victorious, Mir Qasim absconded from the battle, and the other two, that is Shah Alam II, the Mughal Emperor, and the Nawab of Awadh, Shuja-ud-Dawla, both of them, they surrendered to the British army. The battle resulted in 1765 with the Treaty of Allahabad, in which the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II gave the sovereignty of Bengal to the British. The outcome of the battle was the misuse of Farman, that is, the grant which was given to them to trade, and also the trade expansionist aspiration of the English, means they were given permission, Farman, the grant, to trade But that was not it. They wanted to expand their trade more and more throughout different areas of India. So students, as I told you that the Battle of Buxar took place in 1764 and it was fought between the Nawab of Bengal, the Nawab of Awadh and the Mughal Emperor on one side and the British on the other side. The British emerged victorious again, and thus the English East India Company laid a foundation of colonial rule in India. Gradually, through various policies, they became the rulers of India for a long time. Students, now let us see what were the policies laid by the British, and they started spreading trap on Indians. And what were this trap in the means of policies? Let us understand what were those policies. Students, let us understand the subsidiary alliance policy. The British East India Company started an outright war of non-intervention policy and the assumption of the territory of previously subordinated rulers to achieve the political aspiration. Meaning, the subsidiary alliance system was used by Lord Wellesley, who was the Governor General from the period of 1798 to 1805, to establish the British Empire in India. Now, according to this system, every ruler in India had to accept to pay a subsidy to the British for maintenance of British army. In return, British would protect the kings from their enemies, which gave British enormous expansion. It was firstly used by Lord Wellesley, who effectively institutionalized the policy of non-intervention, which made the Nawab and Nizams subsidiary allies by signing almost 100 such treaties. Now the uh, allies of Indian states ruler were compelled to accept, means they were forced to accept the permanent garrison of British army within their territories and to pay a subsidy for the maintenance. The Indian ruler could not employ any European in their service without prior approval of British. The Indians could not negotiate with any other Indian ruler without consulting the Governor General. Now, the states which came under the periphery of this policy was the Nizam of Hyderabad. He was the first victim of this policy. He was detached, the Nizam was detached from the French and also forbade having alliances with Maratha without British consent. The second state was Mysore. Then Wellesley compelled Nawab of Awadh to accept the policy of subsidiary alliance. Peshwa Bajirao too also subjugated his state under this policy. Many Maratha states like Bhosle and Sindhias also accepted the terms of the policy. The last Maratha confederation, that is Holkars, also they accepted the terms of subsidiary alliance. The policy of subsidiary alliance was in reality a document of losing the sovereignty, which meant the state did not have any rights of self-defense, of maintaining diplomatic relations, of employing foreign experts, and of set its disputes with its neighbors. So ultimately, it the power ultimately went under the British control. So, this was about subsidiary alliance policy. The second policy introduced by the British was the doctrine of lapse. Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General from 1848 to 1856, devised the doctrine. It stated that a king could be annexed if the king died without a male heir. Many kingdoms were annexed, and those kingdoms were Satara, Sambalpur, Udaipur, Nagpur, Jhansi, and Awadh. Children, if you remember, we had talked about the discontent among Indians because of the introduction of various policies of British. Let's see in short that the strict laws imposed by British over Indians dissatisfied them, like the harsh and exploitative policies, uh, which gave really dissatisfaction among rulers, weavers, farmers, etc. The British imposed heavy taxes on farmers and forced them to grow cash crops like opium, indigo, and cotton. British purchased these crops from the farmers at low prices and sold them at very high rates in England and other countries. Indian rulers were unhappy as they were afraid of losing their kingdoms under the doctrine of lapse and subsidiary alliance policies. People thought that their religion under threat because religion was under threat because many of them had been converted to Christianity by various missionaries. Now, businessmen were unhappy because raw material for making cloth was taken from India at low prices and then the finished product was sold back to India. Indian weavers suffered as they could not compete with factory made cloth. Indian soldiers were unhappy because the new Enfield rifle issued to them were believed to be greased with the fat of cows and pigs. This hurt their religious feelings and they refused to use the bullets. Now, all this created lot of discontent among the Indians. As we discussed that there was a lot of discontent among the Indians, so and very soon the sepoys were forced to use the greased covered cartridges. Now this all led to an uprising of revolt in 1857, widely known as the Revolt of 1857 or the Sepoy Mutiny. The immediate cause of the revolt was the introduction of Enfield rifle, and the cartridge of the rifle had a grease cover which had been to be bitten off before use. It was believed that this cover was greased with the fat of cows and pigs. This offended the religious sentiments of both Hindus and Muslims, as Hindus were not permitted to eat beef and Muslims are not permitted to eat pork. The Indian soldiers refused to use cartridge and they overthrew their superiors and marched to Delhi to crown Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah II, also known as Bahadur Shah Zafar, as a rightful emperor. What started as Sepoy rebellion or mutiny soon became the first war of independence. The Indian rulers and leaders such as Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, Nana Sahib, Tatya Tope and Kunwar Si joined the rebels. So there was a rebel in 1857 which soon came to be known as the First War of Independence. Students, now let me explain you that though revolt failed, but it sowed the seeds of nationalism. Let me explain you in detail. Nationalism is the feeling of love and devotion for one's own country. The revolt of 1857 sowed the seeds of nationalism within Indians and instilled in them the courage to fight against the British. Many social reformers played an important role in educating the people and removing ill practices that prevailed in Indian society. These reformers protested against the sati system, child marriage, and caste system. They advocated for women's education, widow remarriage, and the upliftment of all the sections of society. All this led to the formation of Indian National Congress, that is INC, in 1885. The Indians realized that the British had conquered India to promote their own interests and were not at all interested in the welfare of Indian people. Now, when all these social and religious reformers came to know this or realize this, they felt that British rule should come to an end. The Indian National Congress was the first political party, and people from various backgrounds joined it. The INC was formed to draw the attention of British government to the problems faced by the Indians. And the members of INC did this through prayers and petitions. But this was the early nationalist phase. Leaders such as Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Surendranath Banerjee, Dadabhai Naoroji believed in the British sense of justice and felt that the reforms in the Indian society would take place soon. But all this was ignored by the British. The younger member of the Congress and the other members disagreed with one another over the methods of bringing about reforms. Some younger members started the assertive nationalist phase of INC in 1905. Leaders such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal wanted immediate action. Tilak wanted the common people to become a part of the movement as he felt that nothing would happen without them. Tilak's newspaper Kesari was very critical of the British. So the team of Lal, Bal and Pal, that is Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, were three of them known as the team of Lal, Bal and Pal. So they finally believed that unless each and every Indian will not participate, freedom is not possible to attain. So assertive phase, that is INC, started some different movements in 1905. Now let us know what happened in 1905. In 1905, the province of Bengal was divided into two. Lord Curzon, who was the Viceroy of India in 1899 to 1905, followed by the policy of divide and rule and partitioned Bengal into two parts between the Hindu dominated and Muslim dominated areas. Now students, though Lord Curzon tried to divide Bengal into Hindu and Muslim dominated areas, people protested against this partition, but the reason given was that this would make the ruling easier as Bengal is a very big area or the large province. Because of this massive protest, British were forced to reunite the two parts in 1911, but it had already created the massive differences in the minds of Hindus and Muslims. In December 1906, the Muslim League was formed under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah Khan in Dhaka. Muhammad Ali Jinnah joined the Muslim League in 1913. Now, due to all this happening, the two important events at that time was launched by Indian National Congress were Swadeshi and boycott movements in Bengal. Due to the partition of Bengal, the other part of India, the people living in other parts, the reformers, the activists thought that now it is time that there has to be something done. So they launched two important movements, Swadeshi and boycott movements. And that movements had a very simple principle that British made goods were boycotted and people were asked to buy Indian made or Swadeshi goods. It led to the establishment of textile mills, banks, soap and pen factories, and British made goods were thrown into bonfires. Students and women joined the movement in large numbers. Schools were established where the traditional education system was followed. The movement spread in other parts of India. Crowds were attacked by British authorities, hit with lathis, bullets, and put into jails, but Indians this time did not deter them. So, children, finally, the British agreed to bring in some reforms. But soon after, the First World War broke out in 1914. The British asked the Indians to help them fight the war. The Indians helped, thinking that the British would make changes after the war ended in 1918 and give them, means the Indians, their freedom. But instead, the British passed stricter laws such as Rowlatt Act and tried to strengthen their control over India. So this was all about this chapter, the coming of British. The British came as trader and then stayed here for almost 200 years. So this was just the beginning of fight or beginning of the protest where the whole India now was with the idea of ending up of British rule. So this is all about this chapter. I hope children you must have enjoyed it. Students, this is the end of the lesson. I hope you all must have enjoyed recapping of previous 7 videos in this video, and today's learning was the summing up of all previous 7 parts which we have seen in parts. I hope you must have enjoyed knowing about the advent of different Europeans to India and then the settlement of British for quite some time in India. Most of you all must have also enjoyed knowing about the brave and bold Indians. So thank you children for listening and understanding this lesson. Stay home, stay safe. See you soon with another learning video. Keep learning.